Hey, it's Ryan with this week's Mille Lacs Fishing Report. It's October 20th and things are cooling down. Main lake water temps are about 48 degrees. Getting started with the muskies, a lot of my attention over the last few weeks and actually throughout the course of the season has been on deeper weed lines. That's going to be changing. I'm going to start shifting my focus from weed lines to rocks pretty much entirely at this point. There's still going to be fish on the weed lines. Typically, they're not going to be as big as the ones that are going to start showing up on the rocks. But if you can find green cabbage, there'll definitely be muskies in the weeds still. Now, since I'm going to be focusing on the rocks, that's what I'm going to talk about mostly. We're going to see a lot more tulipy staging around the shallower reefs on the lake. Generally, you find the tulipy spawning in, 3 to 7 feet of water is where you see a lot of that happening. They'll spawn deeper than that also. But that's where they're going to show up here, typically at the beginning of November. Now, the tulipy spawn at water temps around 42 degrees, so we're still a ways away from that yet. But what they're going to be doing here now is we're going to start seeing them stage a lot more in the deeper water adjacent to those reefs. So a lot of my attention is going to be focused on fishing the deeper water around the reefs, but I'm also going to be fishing the tops of them a lot too. My baits are also going to change for these. I'm going to be throwing more crankbaits, more swim baits, especially the larger swim baits, stuff such as pounders or big paddle tail swim baits are things that I like to use. I'll also use crankbaits if I'm casting them. I'm going to use smaller crankbaits. But if I'm going to be trolling, I'm going to be using fairly large crankbaits, stuff that's in that 10-inch plus range. Trolling can be good right now because a lot of the fish are starting to condense more and more as the season progresses and as more of those tulipy get condensed into smaller areas around the reef, so it makes it a little easier for trollers. Trolling the big baits, trolling them fast still, about 4 miles an hour around the reefs. You typically want to be in depths, anywhere from about 15 to 30 feet when you're trolling. You can go shallower, you can fish the deeper water around there too. But typically when I'm trolling, I like to be in the 15 to 20 foot range. There just seems to be a lot going on in that range over the course of many different years. So big things will be happening in the muskie world over the next few weeks. Expect to see some giant fish caught by people. Hopefully I'm one of them. But we're going to see some big fish this year, as a lot of people know. But for some of you who don't know, we've had 2 state records come out of Mille Lacs in the last year. We had a guy last November catch the official state record. And then we also had a guy this June catch the catch and release state record out of the lake. So Mille Lacs is going to be popular this fall. There's going to be a lot of people looking for giant fish in that 50-pound class and above. And it's going to happen. There's going to be a couple caught. There is every season. Moving on to the walleye bite. Walleye bite is doing okay. We're catching fish out here. What I would recommend doing if you're going for the walleyes, there's still fish out deep, but most of my focus has been on the shallower water. I've been staying mostly in 20 feet or less. During the day, I'd recommend, you can fish anywhere from 7 to about 18 feet. Trolling crankbaits is a good way of catching them right now. Now in the shallows, you can troll stick baits. Stick baits work well up in 10 feet of water or less. If you're fishing a little bit deeper, you might have to go with something with a little deeper diving bill. But the rocks have a lot of fish on them, especially if you can find rock to gravel transitions during the day. There's a lot of fish in there. There's also a lot of keeper size fish in there. So if you're looking to eat walleyes, I would say those rock to gravel transitions is probably going to be the best place to find keeper size fish at this time. For the guys that are trolling at night, you can get up pretty shallow, especially if you have a little bit of wind. You can fish as shallow, trolling in as shallow as 3 feet of water. Most of the time I spend my time in about 6 to 10 feet when I'm trolling after dark. But anywhere from that 3 to 12 foot range is going to hold fish. If you get a little chop on the lake at night, it makes things a lot easier. The fish don't spook as much. But the trolling will definitely produce fish at night also. For the guys that want to cast, you can try casting crankbaits. I would say that 6 to 12 feet of water during the day is going to have fish in it. The other thing you can do is cast little paddle tail swim baits. The little 4-inch paddle tails catch a lot of fish this time of year. You don't have to mess with minnows. You don't have to mess with live bait. It's a lot easier on the hands keeping them warm. But little paddle tails work well. The other thing you can do is you can also drag a jig and a minnow. And I wouldn't recommend going with a giant minnow for that. Just a little 4-inch minnow is typically all you need. And just pick the appropriate size jig for for the application. You know, if you're in 12 feet of water or so, a quarter ounce is probably plenty. If you have some wind and you want to fish up a little bit shallower, you can probably get by with 1/8 of an ounce. And finally, the smallmouth. The smallmouth bite's been pretty good over the last week or so, but we're going to see some big changes now. Water temps have pretty much plummeted on us. We've had some real cold nights. We had skim ice this morning in some of the harbors. I know we have had it the last couple mornings too, so things are really dropping as far as water temps go. And what has been a pretty good smallmouth bite over the last week is going to start getting tougher. I expect this weekend, with the warmer weather that we have coming, it's going to keep things going. We're going to continue to catch some fish. But after that, when it starts cooling off again, I would suspect that it's going to get a lot tougher to catch fish. Where we've been doing best is we've actually still been catching plenty of fish up shallow. We're marking fish out deeper, but the fish that are deeper and kind of suspended over the deeper water, they've been pretty difficult to get to bite. Now, if I can find them in anywhere from 7 to 12 feet of water, that seems to be where we catch the most fish. Now, as far as baits go for the smallmouth, swim baits, little 4-inch paddle tails, they've been working well for us. The other thing that works great this time of year is dragging baits on the bottom, be it a Ned rig or a tube. What's going to happen though is as it cools off more and the bite becomes tougher and the fish start moving deeper, you're going to have to change things a little bit. Something that I do with my swim baits is I go to more of a wider wiggling swim bait, something that's a little fatter profile, and I tend to drag them on the bottom very slowly. The other thing that works well is dragging tubes very slow on the bottom as the water temps really start to plummet here. And finally, the last thing that I know a lot of guys do, I don't do as much of it, but I know it works, is guys will throw stuff like blade baits or jigging wraps and try to get a reaction bite out of the fish. A little gold blade bait works really well at this time of year of provoking just a reaction. All you do is snap it up off the bottom, and you're just trying to get the fish to react to it. The jigging wraps, I think most people know what those are all about. Let them sink to the bottom, snap them up, let them sink back down. A lot of times you can get a reaction out of fish doing that too. And that's kind of how things will end this year, is it'll be using those style of baits, be it the jigging wraps, the blade baits, or dragging the tubes or dragging the swim baits on the bottom. One last thing with the smallmouth is as things get colder, you're going to find that the smallmouth congregate a lot more. They get tougher to catch as it gets colder out, but you can still catch them. They tend to congregate more and they tend to move deeper as things get cold. And something that I would do is you can fish those fish if you find them on your electronics, but a lot of times you're still better off going to the adjacent structure right next to them. And the final part to that is I would wait for the warmer part of the day. I know a lot of people like to fish, sunrise and sunset, that sort of thing. But when things get really cold like this, it tends to be best right in the heat of the afternoon. So even though you find those fish that are out off the structure in the deeper water, I would still try to find the structure adjacent to them, and I would fish the structure instead of the school of fish. There's a couple different trains of thought on that. If you can get the school to go, sure, by all means go for it, but a lot of times you find that the fish that actually move back to the structure are the ones that are actively feeding, and they're a lot easier to catch. Hopefully these bits of info help you out, and have a great weekend.